And I really appreciate the opportunity, Kate, just to encourage your team. So I tried to pull together some thoughts, and Nate's thoughts about Elijah and the widow were thoughts that I was going to share, but then I did something different because he did that. And so that was a God thing. But what I want to talk about is fundraising in the tough times, right? I mean, we're all facing tough times of the COVID pandemic and recession and people losing their jobs and your supporters losing their jobs. You think, man, what's going to happen? So the Elijah story is great because certainly he was in a famine and God provided him through the generosity of the widow. But another story that I think is really encouraging, you know, scripture tells us that we need to ask, it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock, it will be open to you. And so we always talk about that in the context of seeking the Lord and asking God. But I look at it in the context of fundraising. And I think it's applies to us to help us to say, how can we find the resources we need for our ministry? So here's the story I want to talk to you about. It's the friend of midnight. And you know this parable really well. And it's, I love it because there's so many fundraising applications that we can make to this. So you remember the story. Then he said to them, suppose one of you has a friend, and he goes to him at midnight and says, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread because a friend of mine on a journey has come to me and has nothing to set before him. Then the one inside says, don't bother me. The door's already locked and my children are in bed with me. I cannot get up and give you anything. I tell you that though he will not get up and give him the bread because he is his friend, yet because of the man's boldness, he will not get up. He will get up and give him as much as he needs. I love this passage. Now, here's another version that I think is really insightful. The New Living Translation says, but I tell you, though he won't do it for friendship's sake, if you keep on knocking long enough, he will get up and give you whatever you need just because of your shameless persistence. But then I like another one here. The Contemporary English version says, he may not get up and give you the bread just because you're his friend, but he will get up and give you as much as you need simply because you're not ashamed to keep on asking. That's wonderful. So we think about our donor relationships and our friends and the concept of asking for support. And sometimes we're fearful of it, and sometimes we're burdened by it and just wears us out. But this verse and this passage needs to tell us that we need to be persistent and we need to keep going. We need to keep asking, and God will provide. So I have like 6 applications from this little parable for us. So think about this man. He faced a desperate need, right? He had a friend come to his house and he couldn't provide for him. And so he faced a desperate need. You face a desperate need as well. Maybe it's your own personal support. Maybe it's your ministry support where you have so many opportunities, but you don't have enough resources. Maybe it's evangelism, right? I mean, everybody in your world faces a desperate need and you have the answer. Well, the hour was late. It says it was at midnight, and I'm going to spiritualize this and make the application to say, spiritually, the hour is late for us, right? There's an urgent factor in for you to fulfill your mission. There's people dying and they need Christ, and it's an urgent thing. And so the hour is late. The man was asking to benefit someone else. I like this because sometimes we think that we're asking for personal support to benefit ourselves because we have to pay our rent and our needs and our ministry. We think it's for us, but really you need to think about this. You're asking for support to benefit the people you serve. You're asking for someone else. So is this friend at midnight. The man turned to his friend for help. So this is a great application. Sometimes we think of the major donor world and we say, oh man, I need I need to find some mega donor somewhere in some other country that can step up and help me. But that's not real what this guy did. He didn't go to another town, or he didn't walk, 2 days to find help. He went to his neighbor, his friend, the person who knew him, the person who loved him and appreciated him, and he turned to his friend for help. And so I want to say, you need to turn to your friends as well. And you say, well, I don't have enough friends. Well, ask God to help you identify more friends. And this is the one that's really the clicker here. His friend gave because this guy just kept asking. The first answer was, I can't get up and give you anything, right? Because he was in bed with his kids. Well, you think about what is this all about? Well, he was in a little one-room little home. It was all right there. He actually was in bed with his kids, and to get up and get bread for his friend would have woken up the 2-year-old, and it would take him 2 hours to get back to bed. It would have been cause a problem. But the guy kept knocking. He said, finally, I got to get up, or this guy's not going to let me rest. And so the persistence angle is really important. Keep asking. And then asking, number 6, asking impacts the donor's entire family. So I think of it this way. If you ask me for $100, I can, just give you $100. If you ask me for $1,000, I probably should check with my wife. If you ask me for $10,000, I need to know a lot more about you and a lot more about your ministry. But it impacts the entire, ask me for $100,000, my kids are probably going to say, hey, what are you doing, Dad? So does that mean we shouldn't ask? No, this guy asked, but it did impact the family. And we need to realize that there are certain times that these kinds of gifts are bigger than just that one donor. So again, just to remind you, he may not get up and give you the bread just because you're his friend, but because he will get up and give you as much as you need, simply because you're not ashamed to keep on asking. So now I want to talk about the process of asking and how you can frame your story and how you can grow in your personal support, in your ministry support, how you can find more supporters. So we think of 6 R's, and I'm going to talk through these with you and explain what it looks like. The research piece, who do you know? A romance piece, which means cultivate relationships with these people. A request, that's where you actually have to ask them, would you prayerfully consider helping us? Recognize them, which means thanking them appropriately. Recruiting them, asking them, who else do you know that might have an interest in our ministry that would consider supporting us? And then to report, that means we got to keep people informed, keep talking about your story. Don't go radio silence on them. Help them continue to understand the great work God is doing in your ministry. So let's talk about these. So research. I need to find out, you need to find out, who do you know? Who's in your world? I'm looking for people who have a stewardship focus, people who have a heart for ministry. I'm looking for people with relationship with me or relationship with a friend or whatever. So the process, and Nate even talked a little bit about this, you've got a name storm. Sit down and just write down every name you can think of all the contacts you've ever had. And for people starting out raising personal support, this is a full-time job. Perhaps you're like at 50% or 75%, or you just need a little bit more to kind of top off your budget or meet some specific needs. Same process. Go back and ask the Lord to give you insight to bring people's names to your mind to really try to figure out, who do I know? So maybe it's someone from college. Maybe it's somebody from your church when you're growing up as a kid. Maybe it's somebody from your first church or your second church, or maybe it's somebody from your family, or maybe it was a business associate. Maybe it's somebody you worked for who was a believer. Who knows? You just need to list as many names as possible to figure out where God might be leading you to for more support. I always think of it in this way. I'm trying to find donors. What's the link to me? Maybe it's a friend of a friend, and that's great. What's the interest? A lot of people, everybody has a giving interest. Some people like to give to buildings. Some people like to give support to actual people because they believe that that's the heart and soul of ministry. But then the ability. Does this person have the ability to give $1,000, or could they give $10,000 or $100? All of those are great, but we just kind of need to think through what is the capacity here, and I need to kind of focus on my top donors first to make sure I can find some key gifts. Now, romance is the next step of the R's, 6 R's. By romance, don't get thrown off by that. I'm saying we need to cultivate relationships. And you think about cultivating relationships, so you think of a marriage is, you know, for those of you who are married, I'm guessing, I could be wrong, but I'm guessing that many of you did not ask your wife to marry you on your first date. And I say that every once in a while in my presentations, and there's always somebody who says, oh, I did. It's like, wow, I can't believe that. But, and they've been married for 30 years. It's like, wow, okay. But that's not how it usually happens, right? It takes a lot of candy and flowers. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of conversations. And you got to convince, you got to build your case. You got to convince people that you're a worthy decision. Well, really, that's the same thing with donors. You can't really jump into somebody's life the very first time and say, oh, by the way, I just met you. Would you give me $10,000? Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, but that happens, but it's not the process. Usually it takes time. They need to hear your story. They need to trust you. They need to have confidence that your ministry is making a difference. It takes time. I want to tell you this great story. So Allison is a missionary to Croatia. And Allison, I did not know Allison, but my son knew Allison. My son went to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, Illinois, and Allison was his classmate. And so one day, my son, who is a youth pastor now in Hong Kong, he's at Island Evangelical Community Church in Hong Kong. One day he texted me, he says, hey, Allison is going to go to Croatia. I'd like to have you consider supporting her. She's a quality person and she'll do a great job. And so I got on Allison's email list, and I started studying, okay, what's Allison's plan? What's she doing? And so Allison did a wonderful job. So one of the comments that somebody wanted me to talk about is, how do I communicate with my donors electronically, digitally? What's my digital strategy? Well, your digital strategy needs to be, you need to have email that is clear, concise, it's chock full of information. She updated people monthly, and I just really appreciated getting to know Allison. So here's the thing. This was on her way to building her first support before she went to the field. And she said, hey, I have 73 people who are become my monthly partners now, and I'm 76% to my goal, and I've got to reach 100% or they're not going to let me go. And would you consider supporting? So this is just her email. She updated me monthly. She used these little charts to say, okay, you know, there's one-time gifts because I have travel expenses, but then there's the monthly support. This is what is my budget. So it kept me going, kept me understanding. She would always share prayer requests. I know you guys are doing that too, but I think it's so critical. Then she would always, in her emails, she would give me all the links to her website, to her question and answers and blog posts. So before I even knew Allison, I read her website, I read her updates, I saw pictures, I did everything I could research-wise, and I became a supporter. So Allison at one point said, okay, I'm $925 left to go, and here are the kinds of donors I need. Here's what I need to accomplish my goal. I need 1 at 25, I need 2 at 50, I need 3 at 100, I need 2 at 200. And this is a really wonderful strategy for you to help help a donor visualize how they can fit on your team. And I did that. I looked at it and I said, okay, I'm looking at these numbers and I think I could do that. In fact, I remember doing one number and it got her a little ways. And I remember going back like 3 or 2 months later and doubling it and doing another number because I wanted to see her get to the field. Now, so the interesting thing, I have never met Allison personally, but I'm supporting her. My wife and I are supporting her because of my son. And that's, I think, a lesson for you is that your supporters can become your advocates and your champions to help introduce you to their friends and family. And you may be able to find some supporters through the relationships that you already have. So you need to over communicate with your donors, especially now. Allison has texted me. Allison has emailed me. Allison has sent me letters and signed thank you notes. We have not done a video call yet, but it could work. I'm sure you're doing video calls, but especially now in the time of COVID, you can't travel and that. So you need to text people, say, hey, can I call you? And you need to do a video or voice call with your key donors. I just had a call with my son in Hong Kong on WhatsApp. We do it all the time. Well, you do it all the time with all your friends and family. You need to do that with your donors and have these phone calls. Maybe you should film a short video on your phone and just email it to your supporters. Now, that's a great way to give them a sense of what your ministry is all about. I've seen some of those things from Allison. I think it's wonderful. But you need to email weekly verses and prayer requests with photos. You need to, out of sight, out of mind. It's like you've got to over communicate. And I think it's a really key, especially during this time. All right, so that's in the romance. So then the third one is request. In your relationship with your donors and your supporters, you need to actually get to the point where you ask them for a gift. So who are you going to ask? Well, it's the right prospect. And the number one reason people give is because of who asked them. Like I said, my son asked me and he was the right guy. I mean, I would have, who knows? Who knows what my relationship with Allison may have become or may not have become had it not been for my son's introduction. What are you going to ask for? You're going to ask for personal support, but you can ask for project support. Help us with this evangelistic effort. Help us with this initiative, and lay it all out for them. So where do you ask? Now, here's where it really comes into play. Really, the best thing to do is face-to-face conversations, face-to-face asking at their kitchen table, presenting your project and asking them would they prayerfully consider supporting. Now, here is a little tool. This is a personal case statement, and you need to consider, maybe you've already done something like this, but this is a document that tells your story, tells you what your plans are, and it says, well, our focus is going to be ministry and medical and building teams or doing training. So it's just a document that tells your story. And at the last of the document, it shows your budget, and then it shows, okay, here are the kinds of gifts that I need to raise this kind of money. So this little tool is a really great tool. And if you don't have a document like this, this would be a great document for you to develop some talking points that you have that you can express exactly your budget, your plans, your need, the opportunity. The closing statement in your conversations with people, would you prayerfully consider becoming my prayer and financial partner? And I like to name the number. I mean, Allison had the chart, and the chart is great, but I'd like to say maybe it's $50, maybe it's $200, but that's all based on what I think I know about that person and what their capacity is. Now, certainly you would just let the Holy Spirit lead them and make the decision as well, but it's also helpful to give them a specific number and give them an opportunity. Recognized is the fourth R, so that's just being thankful. And I'm sure you do that with your supporters now, but I just can't express enough that this is critical. You need to be grateful and thankful to your donors and continue to show your appreciation for their support. Recruiting is the fifth item, and recruiting is kind of what I've expressed in my example with Jared. Ask your donors, would they be a friend raiser for you? Would they open doors for you? Could they introduce you? Now, if you're in a certain area, I like to ask my donors to host a fundraising event in their home and invite their friends to come in, and you can share your story. And it's all about relationships, and it's all about starting friendships. And actually, I have a friend, Dave and Laura. They are in Niger. He's with MAF, and he's a missionary pilot. And he was in the States about 4 years ago or so. And he sat down with me and he said, Ron, my support, I'm like at 75%. I got to get back up. I've been losing support. And I said, well, hey, let me host an event in my home. So I did. So we had 20 couples come to our house. Dave and Laura shared their story. I passed out a little card. Hey, we'd love to follow up and see if this might be something that you would be consider supporting them. And we followed up, and it was incredible. One person gave $200 a month. One person gave $100 a month. Another person gave $50 a month. And so Dave and Laura were able to get their support back to full support because I was able to network with my friends and encourage them to support Dave and Laura. So I want you to consider something like this. It's not your PowerPoint. It's the conversations before and after that make the real difference. Report is number 6, and that just means I have to continue to tell people how their gift is being used, what's the eternal impact, what are the stories of their gift that's making a difference. This is so critical because people want to know that they're making an ongoing impact for Christ. So you need to develop a solicitation plan for each donor. You need to rate each donor, and you need to ask for a specific amount. Now you can just do the general thing, and that's great, but I'm just trying to help you move ahead in a sense. You know, if you had a project, say you need to raise $10,000, you need to be really open with that, and you give people the information, the opportunity, and say, and would you consider a gift of $2,000 or $5,000? I mean, I just think it's great. It helps the donor to fit in and know how it works. I think probably you've been aware of the God Ask. It's an incredible book. And Steve Shadrach, you know, he's such a skilled missionary and fundraiser. And this, if you don't have the God Ask, you need to get it. But if you don't have the God Ask, you can get the resources on the God Ask. These resources to help you with little forms and how to track your appointments and how to have accountability. And all of these things are really helpful. And it's all free on the website. But I encourage you to get the book because he has so many great comments that would just encourage you. And it's just all a biblical approach to raising ministry partners.